Hello there, BookTube. It's
Hello
Roz.
again. It's Tilly from Tilly's Shelf.
And we're together.
Which is lovely.
Just such a joy. So we're recording a few things,
Yeah.
and this one is a tag. And it is the A tag, which is an original tag by Jim's books, Reading and Stuff. I got it in the right order, Jim. And he's doing, well, I think he's doing he's probably done B and C by now as well.
Well, who knows?
Even though this was only about a week ago.
We've been effectively off the
We've been a bit
online.
Yes, we've been a bit off grid for the last week. So we've been walking in the Yorkshire Dales.
Which is a lovely thing to do. I highly recommend it.
Very, very lovely thing to do, and I can't recommend it enough. And I might try and make a thumbnail that is
based on
a lovely picture of from our walk in the Yorkshire Dales.
I think that would be a lovely thing.
But this tag is all A things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we've got to start by tagging people because
at the beginning,
that's what the smart kids are doing apparently. Yeah. So Scott and Nell have got Murder Fiction and Plot said it was a good thing to do, and I agree. But what I haven't been able to do properly is check who's already done this tag, and I know Jim tagged a shed load of people, but I'm going to say Alan of Big Hard Books and Classics, although I bet Jim tagged him. Katja Weinart, because I was watching one of her videos this morning. Gina Stania, who I'm enjoying a lot at the moment, and Rosie Cockshut. So that will do.
Yeah, that's a good selection.
And if you've already done it, apologies. I have to say I haven't kept up over the last week.
Trying to load a video on the Wi-Fi signal that we had was not
so
not likely.
They're all A's, and the first A is for America, and Jim asked us to name our idea of the great American novel. Now, we're both a bit dubious about this as a concept, aren't we?
Yeah, I was kind of, my response was kind of, should I have an idea of the great American novel? I've read quite a lot of books that people might consider to be the great American novel.
You haven't read Moby Dick.
I haven't read Moby Dick, but I've read The Great Gatsby, and I've read, On the Road, and I've read The Scarlet Letter, or I've read a couple of American novels, but I don't know what the criteria are to make it the great American novel.
Yeah, have you read Edith Wharton at all?
I haven't read any Edith Wharton.
Steve Donahue picked The House of Mirth for this, and I did think that was a really good answer.
Yeah, is that what you're picking for this one then?
No, no. I was tempted to pick The Awakening by Kate Chopin because...
I nearly picked The Awakening by Kate Chopin.
Only because Steve had got me thinking about it in a different way, as opposed to not, big American novels by big male Americans.
Big American men, yes.
But I've so enjoyed my last couple of years doing Faulkner in August that I'm going to pick The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, because that epitomises to me what, the American novel is, I suppose, or could be, like, as in the more interesting version, as opposed to, I don't know, Saul Bellow or Philip Roth or something, like the modernist version. Anyway, so taught me a lot about America, I suppose.
So I've picked the American novel that has been, to me, probably the most innovative and interesting and eye-opening. The American novel that I've read multiple times and got more from each time, and that is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I haven't read anything else by Toni Morrison, which I definitely should do, but I just found it so original and gripping, and because it's very centered in aspects of American culture and history, and I think that's what makes it a great American novel as opposed to just a great novel.
Yes.
It couldn't come out of the context in which it's written, I suppose, and remain the same book.
Yeah, that's a really impressive answer for this time in the morning.
Is it? Well, anyway.
Question number 2. A is for arc, the most interesting character arc.
Oh, I didn't pull these ones out of the shelves. We're supposed to have things to wear.
Oh, well.
After I'd pulled some things out.
We did not confer about this till after we'd made our choice. So we laughed when we found out, because my choice is War and Peace by Tolstoy, because of the dual character arcs of Pierre or Piotr and Natasha or Natalia, that like run through this long novel and then kind of like converge,
but I haven't read it
at the end, so I'm not going to spoil it. The fact they converged could mean anything.
Yeah.
Two character arcs that converge.
And my choice of the book with the best character arcs is Anna Karenina, also by Tolstoy. So what we're concluding here is that Tolstoy is the best creator of character arcs.
An extended character arc.
Yeah. And what I like about Anna Karenina is that it's not just Anna Karenina's arc, it's not just Vronsky's arc, but it's almost every character has an effective arc, which shows them changing as a person, but remaining the same identifiable character. Like, there's never an arc that takes them too far away from where they started for it to be believable.
Yes. And it never feels like, oh, they're going on a journey.
Yeah, it never feels forced, but it just happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
So, there we go. Tolstoy it is.
Yeah.
Now then, the third thing that Jim said is not prompt number 3, but that A is for Abby, which is the name of his beagle.
Yeah.
And he had some footage of his beagle. Now, we don't have footage
of a beagle called Abby.
Of a beagle called Abby, nor either of our cats, if we were going to have another pet. But while we were walking in the Yorkshire Dales, we saw a lot of birds.
We saw 64 different species of bird, which is a bird for every mile that we walked.
Which is not bad.
So we thought we need a bird that begins with an A to be able to share with you. And none of the birds that we saw had a common name beginning with an A, which for some reason is quite unusual in England. But we did see an apus, which is a swift.
An apus is it's a double A.
Which is a very, very beautiful bird, nice crescent moon shaped flying bird. And on the same page spread, we didn't see, and we really felt like we ought to have seen, a Alcedo aphis, which is a kingfisher.
Because we were walking in Nidderdale and we spent a lot of time on the banks of this river, which has kingfishers, and we saw dippers, we saw mandarin ducks, shavellers, grey wagtails, pied wagtails,
shelducks, all kinds of water birds, basically, sandpipers,
common sandpipers, moots, coots, moorhead, every water-related bird you could wish for.
Mallard ducks, lots of mallard ducks.
Except
and we didn't
tufted
see a
duck.
kingfisher.
No kingfishers.
And every time we came to a bit of river, I'd be like, oh, maybe we'll see a kingfisher. I hope we'll see a kingfisher. And we didn't. We didn't ever see a kingfisher. So anyway, those are two birds with lots of names beginning with A.
Prompt number 3, A is for Australia. Okay. Now, first of all, I'm going to complain because...
Why is A for Australia?
Well, because, Jim said A is for Armenia, A is for Azerbaijan, A is for all these interesting places, and then he plumps on A is for Australia. Not, please, Australians, don't be offended. It's not that Australia isn't interesting, but I felt a little cheated.
Yes.
But it asked for the last book that you read by an Australian author, and mine was The Yield by Tara June Winch, which was a very, very good book, and I've talked about it.
And you read it for Aussie April?
I did.
Last month.
Yeah.
And I can't answer this question because I don't know. I know I have read Australian books in the past. Definitely. I remember I read The Rabbit Proof Fence was a definitely Australian novel or story that I've read.
Memoir.
I don't know what is the last, and I'm sure there will be something relatively recent, but it's obviously not when I'm reading about the author, it doesn't lodge in my head, oh, this is an Australian author. Yeah. And similarly with a lot of books, I don't know whether they're American or British. Like if you're
Canadian,
if you're not reading it in translation, sometimes it doesn't lodge for me.
Whereas The Yield was a very, very Australian book.
I read a memoir of an Australian doctor who worked with MSF.
Oh, you did?
And I can't remember what it was called now. It was something about a broken leg, I think. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the comments.
We'll put it in.
And because the end of it was he went on these missions with MSF and he worked in these very difficult circumstances in various different countries in sort of sub-Saharan Africa, and the end of it was he went and worked in a clinic in far in the Australian outback where he was equally far away from effective large hospital care and also working with very disadvantaged communities, and kind of realised I don't need to go that far afield to make this kind of a difference.
Yeah, to be working in a low resource
setting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like you can do it in Calais.
Yeah. I mean it's different because anyway.
But yeah. So, prompt number 4, A is for Austen. What are you planning for Jane Austen July? Oh, yes, We're both planning for Jane Austen July.
Great fun. Hang on, let me just pull some books
Oh.
over from over here.
Some books. Okay.
Do you want to go first?
Yes. So
there's like 6 different prompts.
6
for
different prompts, and
July.
we're not going to say things for all of them, and I haven't made plans for all of them. I may not do all of them this year because I'm expecting to be reading for the BookTube Prize quite possibly, and then that'll interfere.
Jane Austen July would be more fun. I'm not allowed to say that. Just ignore that.
Ignore that. So, but every year I have to pick which of the main novels I'm going to reread, and I think this year it's time for Persuasion.
Which is your favourite?
Well, what that means is that at the end of July, I will be saying, "Oh, Persuasion is my favourite Jane Austen."
I always think Persuasion is your favourite. You sometimes say that another Jane Austen book is your favourite,
but
Persuasion's the one that you always come back to.
So Persuasion is. So I'm going to read that. Which are you going to read for your main?
I am debating between Sense and Sensibility, which for some reason I picked up Sense and Sensibility, or the other one is Mansfield Park, because at the end of Jane Austen July last year, I really, really, really wanted to read Mansfield Park, but I thought, no, I need to read something for one of the other prompts, so I read Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James, and that was a really bad idea, and it was awful. So don't read that, is my advice for this year's Jane Austen July. And people told me,
I said don't read it.
It's no good, and it is, it's no good.
Yeah, but I think both of us kind of struggle a bit with those the Jane Austen sort of spin-off books, and it's a Jane Austen July prompt to read one of those each year, and I do each year.
I sometimes find them quite fun. I enjoyed Longbourn.
Perhaps you enjoyed them more. Yeah, you enjoyed Longbourn. Longbourn was like kind of like okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't enjoy some aspects of the plot and where it went, but it's kind of it's fan fiction.
It's fan fiction,
and
that's
you don't get fan fiction. I can kind of appreciate some aspects of fan fiction.
But the one that I'm going to read this year for that is The Other Bennet Sister, about Mary Bennet. So
which
based on Pride and Prejudice,
is a really
which
good.
Everyone says is really good. Janice Hadlow. So I'm optimistic that will succeed for me.
And I'm also going back into the world of Pride and Prejudice, where most of these spin-offs seem to be set. And I'm going to read The Heiress by Molly Greeley, and this is about Anne de Bourgh, who's always a character that I've always felt could be greater developed. And the principle is that Anne has actually just been, the reason that she's weak and sickly is because she's been being given laudanum since she was a small child, or
to stop
opium,
her being troublesome.
to stop her being troublesome, and what would happen if she stopped having her laudanum and started being
started living.
Yes.
So it's quite appealing.
Quite fun.
Yeah. I like the sound of that too.
Yeah.
And probably for our, if we can get hold of it, our July discussing drama choice will be
So apparently Jane Austen once wrote a play adaptation of the book that she loved, Sir Charles Grandison. So this is the one thing that Jane Austen wrote that I haven't read yet, apart from some of her letters. So if we can get hold of it, which I think it's slightly harder to get hold of, we're going to read Jane Austen's play.
Jane Austen's play. There we go.
And if we can't get hold of it, I'm going to read some more of her letters.
Yeah, and I shall read. I think I might try and make myself read Sanditon, which I haven't read because I don't like unfinished things.
But it's kind of, it's not started enough to be unfinished.
Yes.
It's more like a description of a place.
Off because, so. That will
if we can get hold of the play version of Sir Charles Grandison, I might try and read, as my Jane Austen contemporary, I might try and read Sir Charles Grandison is like 7 volumes long, but Jane Austen loved it so much that I might try and read like the first volume of it or something, just to get a taste.
Sounds good.
And then there's non-fiction about it, and I found this on our walk. We stopped at Brimham Rocks, which is a National Trust property, and they have a second-hand bookshop run by volunteers, and I found this lovely book, Critics on Jane Austen, that was published in 1970, and it's got...
So it's the latest criticism.
Up to date. Yes. And it divides Critics on Jane Austen into historical critics on Jane Austen, 1813 to 1939, and everyone after 1939 is a modern critic on Jane Austen. So I'm looking forward to reading some literary criticism. And you don't have a...
I haven't picked.
As yet, yeah.
Because I'm not going to pick things and be disappointed, if you know what I mean. Prompt number 5 is A's for automobile. Your favourite literary automobile.
Yes.
And you can go first, Stan.
Oh, yeah. So I decided to pick the automobile in Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck or Joseph Steinbeck? John. It must be John Steinbeck.
Yes.
Yeah. Suddenly the name Joseph appeared at random.
It often does. Yes.
And this is the automobile that the family all piles into when they go on their kind of exodus away from the kind of Dust Bowl, and they turn this. It's just like a normal car suitable for driving around the farm, and then they turn it into like a house on wheels, and like the description of where they put the wardrobe and where they put all of their furniture, and to make it into like this kind of whole wagon home thing that's symbolic of the kind of the journey that they go on. That
Good choice.
I thought it was an interesting
because when Jim first prop tagged me in this, I was thinking I would never be able to think of an answer.
Literary automobile.
No, but then it came to me in a moment of inspiration. The thing that came to me was boop 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 boop. Okay, so we'll explain. In the book The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, which is a lovely, lovely Edwardian children's book, gorgeous. Really there's a wonderful character called Toad who's terribly sort of bumptious and foolish and delightful and generous but impulsive. He's kind of got ADHD, so he's great.
A toad with ADHD.
Yeah, and he gets these. He's rather well off, and he gets these obsessions, and he has an obsession, and his obsession, one of them is to his caravan, like a Romany gypsy caravan with a horse, and he's going along in this, and then this is at the time of when the motor car was new, and he sees his first motor car, and the motor car comes dashing past and spooks the horse, and it's all overturned, and his friends are terribly worried about him, but he is sitting in the middle of the road going boop boop.
And we had it on tape. I think when we were kids, we had it on tape. So I just have this really vivid memory of the narrator's voice of a toad going boop boop.
And she's basically mesmerised by
this automobile.
Yeah, by motor cars, and that gets him into all sorts of trouble later in the book. Yeah, there we go. Question number 6. A is for anonymous. Your favourite poem or novel by an anonymous author.
Yeah. And
you first?
Yeah, the first option that I picked for this was Beowulf. But then as I was picking Beowulf off the shelves, I saw my Oxford Book of Ballads, and these are almost all anonymous, and they are old English folk songs that were collected by various sort of ballad collectors over the course of like the last few centuries. But most of them, the vast majority of them, nobody really knows when they were written or who they were written by or how they came about, but they tell the most amazing stories about women running away with ghosts, or men being stolen and taken off to wars, and they just capture little tiny aspects of England's kind of social history, or Britain's social history, because they come from the ones in here have come from all over this island, and they're just fantastic. And some of them are like based on like Arthurian legends, and some of them are really well situated in the natural world. What did somebody say? Like all great folk songs are about like either sex or death. Like they're all like these kind of dramatic moments or both indeed. Of country, typically of country life. And I've always kind of loved folk music and these songs and the stories that they hold. Stories. So
good choice.
It's no individual work, but just the body of
English ballads. Yes, So, okay, now my choice is, I was so put out by Jim saying that A was Australia that it reminded me that if A was for Azerbaijan, okay, the kind of national novel of Azerbaijan is a book called Ali and Nino, and it's a beautiful love story set in the early 20th century, and it's written, the author on the book is someone called Kurban Said, except that is a pseudonym, and no one really knows who it's a pseudonym for. So it is an anonymous book. It's not by anonymous, it's by Kurban Said, but we don't know who's there are lots of theories about who Kurban Said might be, but it's unknown. So that is my anonymous book.
Yeah, which is a really beautiful choice.
And it's a lovely book, well worth reading.
Yeah.
Prompt number 7, autobiography. Okay, what was the last autobiographical book that you read?
Your turn?
Me first? Okay, that was For Bread Alone by Mohammed Shukri, and it's so he's a Moroccan author, and he was writing about the sort of mid 20th century and his very poverty-stricken upbringing, and yeah, it's quite picaresque and brutal and good.
Yeah, you
How
told
about
me
you?
about it. And the last one that I read, which I finished this week, I finished while we were on holiday together. I finished 5 books. That's the wonderful thing about going on holiday with Roz is you know, in the evenings you walk for hours and hours and hours, and sometimes you stop walking on a beautiful like grassy hillside in the sunshine, or sometimes even in the rain, and then you just sit down and read for about an hour, and then you pick up your pack and walk on again. So I finished 5 books anyway, and then you read in the evening as well. And that the first one that I finished this week was Your Life in My Hands by Rachel Clark, and she was an NHS junior doctor, but before she became a junior doctor she was a journalist. And then this book, I didn't like the title at first because it sounds a little bit conceited, but the book itself is just a fantastic discussion of what it means to be a junior doctor, very strongly situated in the context of the junior doctor contract dispute, which if you're not from England, you won't know anything about. And if you're not very interested in the health service, you probably won't know anything about either. But I found it really, really interesting.
Yeah. And the final prompt, 8. A is for audiobooks. Now, this was where Jim got a bit controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he said, do you consider listening to an audiobook as reading?
Which is an ongoing debate, isn't it?
An ongoing debate. Yeah.
So at the end, I now, for the last 2 years, successfully have made a record of the books that I read. And I keep a record of the audiobooks I've read as well, but I always note down that they were audiobooks. Typically, and I think you're the same, I use audiobooks more for rereading. When I use them for a book that I've not read before, I generally find that I enjoy it less than I otherwise would have done, I think. And at the end of the year, I count up how many books I've read, and I say, I've read this many books and listened to this many audiobooks. So I count them, but they're still distinct in my mind. I wouldn't ever kind of group them together as a book that I've read.
Yeah. And I would, it's not for me to in any way sort of criticise people who really enjoy listening to audiobooks, and audiobooks is how they consume books, and that is reading for them, but it isn't for me, is what I've realised. It works for a reread, but if I find myself in a place where I really can't read anymore, even with increasing the size of the font and having better lighting, and I will be very, very grateful to audiobooks for providing me with a
little bit
of a reading experience. But I don't like having someone else choose the emphasis and the
tone,
stress and the tone, and I want to try out all those different things in my head, and so an audiobook is not the same as reading a book for me. But as to revisit an old favourite, it's nice. It's wonderful. So yeah.
Just thinking about it while we're talking, I do find that if somebody mentions, say for instance, I was listening to the audiobook of Pride and Prejudice, and then somebody mentioned Pride and Prejudice, I probably would say, oh yeah, I'm reading that at the moment. Yeah. But I'd probably qualify it by saying, well, I'm listening to it as an audiobook. Or if it was a new book, oh, have you read, for instance, one that I read as an audiobook, Uprooted by Naomi Novik, I would probably say, oh yes, I've read that. Well, I've listened to it as an audiobook. Like, there would always be that qualifier.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim, for a brilliant tag.
That was a good, diverse selection of questions.
Yeah.
Topics were broad.
Indeed. And have a good week, everybody.
Thank you
That's
for
what I
watching.
usually say after my Tuesday tags. I usually say have a good week, everybody. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Bye.
Bye.